Former President Trump, President-elect Trump, came in 2016, redid his transition after he won, right? So the planning that was in place basically started again in November. He has been really clear about what he wants to do on day one, Savannah and Hoda. He has laid it out. He wants to do mass deportations. There are real questions here that he has not answered, and he has been asked about how do you pay for it? How do you actually do it? Do you separate families? Where do you even begin with something like that? That's one of his key policies. He's talked about tariffs, for example. He's talked about tax cuts. There's a lot that he wants to get done. He's clear about it. Some of it is quite controversial, but if he has a Republican Senate, and he does, and if he has a Republican House, question mark, but we'll know eventually, then that is green lights for him to be able to implement some of these things.
What's your take?
Well, look, I think Donald Trump's political career has been defined by his promise to deal with this issue of illegal immigration. He was very clear, as Hallie said, what he's going to do on day one. Contrast that to Vice President Kamala Harris. There was always this big question mark. What's your day one agenda look like? So I absolutely think that that is going to be one of his first orders of business. In addition to everything Hallie just laid out, he talks about the fact that he wants to fill his administration with loyalists. So one of the things that I'll be watching very closely for are who are the people that he brings into the administration with him. We already know that he's talking about bringing RFK in to do health care. Elon Musk has been a big part of this campaign. He's talked about bringing Elon Musk in as well. The people so far who haven't necessarily raised their hand to come back in, Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner, two people who were a big part of his first administration.
When he made his speech, the two people he mentioned were RFK and Elon Musk. And he said of RFK, like, I'll handle the liquid gold. You handle
do whatever else you want.
You do whatever else you want. So what do you think that means?
Health and Human Services, right? I mean, we're looking at the HHS, maybe FDA. RFK Jr. is somebody who is well known in that anti-vax, quote unquote, community. And he has been vocal about wanting to do that. He talked about, you know, some of these policies around fluoride, for example, that he wants to implement. So I think that's one piece of it here. I will tell you the other thing that's really striking here is we look at how Donald Trump won and how Kamala Harris lost. I was struck, Hoda, when you were going through the board with Steve Kornacki just a couple of minutes ago. I'm thinking, where is there any battleground county where she outperformed Joe Biden? Is there a single battleground county where she actually did better than President Biden did here? So I checked in with a source. You may know him, Steve Kornacki. There's a couple, the suburbs of Atlanta and like one county in Pennsylvania. But overwhelmingly, there is not a place where she did better than Joe Biden in this race.
And I think Hallie hits on a really critical point. Democrats are waking up this morning and asking, what do they need to do to win again? One Democrat put it to me this way: there needs to be a reckoning, that the current leadership needs to think seriously about not just passing the baton, but talking about politics differently and finding and meeting voters where they are. This lawmaker said, right now, we're not doing that. And that is why they believe Donald Trump won.
We've got Ryan Nobles here, too, as well. And I know you'll keep us posted on what's happening with the House, although we don't expect an answer for weeks, potentially, because of these races out west.
Yeah, there's about 60 or so House races that we've yet to call. Right now, we have Republicans with a net gain of 3 seats in the House of Representatives. I wouldn't take that to mean very much right now because so many of these races are up in the air. This is really the Democrats' last best hope of any kind of bastion of power in Washington after the results that we saw there last night. And it's by no means a guarantee. I think even under the best circumstances, if they do hold on to the majority, it's only going to be by 1 or 2 seats, which is going to make it difficult for them to govern and also make it difficult for them to be a thorn in Donald Trump's side and to try and stop his agenda. I think the biggest thing that Democrats would like to have is a foothold in a place like the House of Representatives, because it would give them the opportunity to investigate Donald Trump, right? In the same way that House Republicans have investigated the Biden administration, the House Oversight Committee would have subpoena power. They'd have the ability to do that. But more than anything, they would be a check on any sort of legislative agenda that Donald Trump has. But right now, there's no guarantee they're going to have that.
I wonder if they would, because, you know, they have investigated Donald Trump for years. He's got 4 criminal cases against him. A lot of Democrats thought they had a legal solution to a political problem. They have neither this morning.
Look at what happened. If we can take the time machine back to the primaries, right? When those legal issues came to a head for former President Trump, what did it do? It propelled him forward. It rallied his base around him. And remember, I know that seems like ancient history, but at the time, that was a question mark. There was this open question of whether the fact that this former president would be potentially convicted of felony charges, which he obviously ultimately has been, would be a game changer in any way. It kind of was in his favor. His fundraising numbers went up. He did better in the polls. we obviously two of those federal cases, they go away, right? I mean, he can do whatever he wants to do, basically, to eliminate those cases. But that is, I'm with you here on this. Yeah. What do House Democrats do if they even have?
It's such a great point, Savannah, because. And to Kristen's point as well, there's going to be this push and pull, this reckoning within the Democratic Party. There are going to be a significant number of Democrats that are going to say, we can't just roll over, right? The resistance lives on. If the House of Representatives is our only place for that resistance to exist, we need to take advantage of that. But there's going to be another faction of the party that's going to say, we've got a real problem with rural voters. We have a real problem with working class voters. We need to get our own house in order before we try and engage in more of these kind of back and forth and these adversarial postures.
And there's two different things we're talking about here. You're talking about resistance. OK, fine, to a check on policy.
Right.
That's one thing. Going after and targeting and trying to investigate and all of that. I mean, by the way, the Republicans did it to Biden. The Democrats have done it to Trump. It's time immemorial. But it seems like if you're the Democrats and you're waking up and you're looking at these maps and you're looking at these margins, it is time to look in the mirror and have a real heart-to-heart with your party and yourself and say, where do we go wrong?
And look at the numbers that we got last night. More than 70% of people saying they feel like the country is heading in the wrong direction at the root of this victory. Not just a vote for Donald Trump, but a vote for change, with people feeling frustrated with high prices and some of the other
Well, you
issues.
have, I mean, Kamala Harris effectively an incumbent. She was the vice president of the administration that was before. And so that is always, and I'm taking everything that's extraordinary about this political campaign. That is very ordinary. A vice president to an unpopular president running for essentially a second term is almost never successful.
And trying to figure out how to navigate some distance from him while still being unwilling to break from him completely. That was part of it, too.
It was the biggest challenge of her campaign.
Well, we'll have hours to discuss it.
Yes, we will. All right, guys, let's turn now to a key battleground that remains too close to call. This morning, we are talking about Michigan. Former President Trump held his final rally there. Vice President Harris was in the state over the weekend. We've got NBC's Maggie Vespa. She's standing by there in Grand Rapids. Hey, Maggie, good morning.
Hey, Hoda, good morning from Michigan. Yeah, that all-important brick in the blue wall that is yet to fall, and that's largely because votes are still being counted in Wayne County, which is home to Detroit. It's home to Dearborn. Obviously, that's incredibly urban. It's breaking thus far for the vice president, but we still have less than 90% of the vote in that area. So the statewide, it's still too early to call, but thus far, as you can see, statewide here in Michigan, breaking for now President-elect Trump. Kent County, where we are, where he made his final campaign stop here in Grand Rapids just 2 nights ago. That also breaking for the vice president. Again, this is another urban area, but it just seemed like those sort of sways toward the vice president weren't enough to overcome that red rural sort of swell across the rest of the state. The gender gap here in Michigan was very real, with 55% of men voting for the now president-elect, 53% of women voting for the vice president. It was even more pronounced among white men. And then, you know, we talked yesterday about Michigan being home to the auto industry, home to an Arab American population. But voters here, according to our exit polling, saying the most important issue to them was preserving the state of democracy. That broke heavily for the vice president, but a close second was the economy. There was one man who told us that he voted for now President-elect Trump because, he told us, despite frustrations over things he did in office, despite, as he said, being horrified on January 6th, he told me, quote, every time a Democrat is in office, my wallet suffers. Guys.
All right, Maggie Vespa for us there in Grand Rapids. Maggie, thank you.
And on that topic, according to exit polling, many voters named the economy as a top issue, citing concerns over high prices and inflation. NBC senior business correspondent Christine Romans is with us now. Christine, good morning.
Good morning.
We have talked about this. The voters have now spoken. What are you taking away from the results here?
You know, really early, we could see in these exit polls that people really felt sour about their personal finances. And when people who voted were asked, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago, it was astonishing the number of people who said that they were worse off. When 45%, that number on the bottom, that is the highest worse off figure that we've seen in 5 presidential cycles. That's even worse than the Great Recession, when we were in the middle of a housing crash, against the backdrop of an economy that's doing okay, actually doing well. But inflation was the problem. People are so upset about inflation. I feel like they took inflation with them into the voting booth. We asked them, has inflation caused you and your family a severe hardship or a moderate hardship? 75% said it was a hardship, inflation was. And so that was a really big driving number.
Can I ask you about that? Because we now know that inflation, I mean, look, there are numbers that all the nerds crunch. And then you go to the grocery store and you're like, that's cost $100 and I don't even have a full basket. And have the inflation that people feel the most, gas prices, housing, food prices. We know inflation is at 2%. It's about where, the officials want it to be. But are those prices still as high, or is that part of it? You're still feeling it where you really, notice it?
Even as wages have been going up, too, it is that sticker shock that people keep focusing on. And over the past 18 months or so, wages have been rising faster than inflation. But the American psyche is just really scarred by what happened a couple of years ago when prices were going up so much that was kind of coming out of your, you just couldn't even keep track of it. Now, that has calmed down. But again, it's still fresh in so many people's memories.
Real quick, stock market, how's it looking?
Wow, booming overnight.
Really?
Booming. Oh, yeah. You've had a huge rally in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Now, at 9:30 Eastern time, that's when the markets actually open. But they do have this pre-market trade, these futures trading. The S&P 500, the Dow Jones, the NASDAQ, all up very, very big here. Something called the Russell 2000, which is small stocks. Those are booming really like 6% because they think that Donald Trump, if he has control of Congress, will slash regulations. So companies will be able to make more money because they won't have to follow so many regulations. Also, we're looking at whether his tariff proposals, what that would do for the dollar and for bonds. So all markets are moving really big this morning. And I think what we need to watch over the next few days, there was a big market reaction in 2016. It sort of moderated over the coming days. So this big reaction sometimes can be overdone. But at least this morning, people will wake up and there will be big numbers in the stock market this morning.
Cool.
Nice.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.